At just 10 years old, Rose's world was plunged into chaos. Born in the shadowed lands of the Umbral Realm, a place where the sun's rays rarely penetrated the thick canopy and an eerie red glow emanated from the very realm, she was a dark elf of noble lineage, her parents fiercely protective and deeply loving. Yet their love was not enough to shield her from the darkness that clawed at their realm. One fateful night, the shadows came alive, tendrils of inky blackness consuming her parents and leaving Rose utterly alone in a world of ever-present twilight. The Order of the Grey, a clandestine cabal of dark magic practitioners, discovered her amidst the wreckage of her family's estate. They saw in her the raw potential for greatness, a spark of innate magic that burned brighter than most. The Order took her in, promising her safety and purpose, but their affection came with strings attached. They were not saviors but opportunists, seeking to shape Rose into a weapon, a flawless agent capable of infiltrating the human world unseen. Through ancient and forbidden rituals, they stripped Rose of her dark elven heritage, at least in appearance. Her onyx skin lightened to pale human hues, her pointed ears were rounded, and her striking crimson eyes were dulled to a piercing green. The transformation was excruciating, not just physically but emotionally. With every shift in her features, she felt a piece of her identity slipping away, lost to the Order's machinations. Yet she knew this human guise would grant her access to places and people her elven form never could. The training that followed was relentless. From dawn to dusk, she was immersed in the arcane arts, her days consumed by incantations, sigils, and the weaving of magical energy. Of all the elements, fire spoke to her the loudest. Its flickering light offered a warmth that the cold halls of the Order's fortress could not. Yet, fire was a temperamental master demanding control and precision. During one grueling session, the air thick with smoke and heat waves shimmering, Rose's emotions flared out of control, and the flames answered her turmoil. They lashed out, searing her right hand in a blaze of fiery rebellion. The burn left twisted scars that refused to fade, a constant reminder of her struggle and the price of failure. The Order dismissed her pain, seeing it as a lesson in discipline rather than a reason for comfort. But Rose found strength in her injury. The pain steeled her resolve, and she threw herself into her studies with renewed determination, retreating to hidden corners to practice in secret. Over time, she mastered the fire's dance, bending it to her will and turning it into a formidable weapon. Yet, as her powers grew, so did her resentment. The Order had taken her in, but they had stolen her heritage, her freedom, and her very identity. They sought to erase the dark elf she once was, moulding her into something unrecognizable. Rose began to dream of escape, of a life where she could reclaim what had been lost and forge her own destiny. She learned to play the role the Order demanded, obedient, loyal, and driven, but beneath the surface, a wildfire raged in her heart, a tempest waiting to be unleashed. The infernal forge, a hidden cavern deep within the Umbral Realm, shimmered with oppressive heat. Molten lava bubbled like a living entity, filling the air with the acrid scent of sulfur and smelted metal. Rose was given access to the forge's ancient resources, enchanted metals, magical fibers, and rare materials harvested from the darkest corners of the realm. The bullwhip, an unconventional choice, was inspired by Rose's mother's stories of elven warriors wielding whips of light. It would serve as a flexible, long-range conduit for her flames. For weeks, Rose worked tirelessly, weaving fire-resistant leather with enchanted steel threads and runes of power. The obsidian handle pulsed with shadow-infused energy. Despite exhaustion, Rose's determination never wavered. The final enchantment pushed Rose to her limits. As she channeled her magic into the whip within the forge's searing heart, flames erupted around her. For a terrifying moment, the inferno threatened to consume her. But Rose's resolve burned brighter. She poured her defiance, pain, and will into the whip. As the flames subsided, the whip glowed with inner fire. Rose grasped the handle, feeling its power pulse through her. With a flick of her wrist, the whip crackled to life, a blazing streak of flame that moved as an extension of her own body and magic. Rose smiled, knowing she had created something truly her own. The bullwhip quickly became Rose's favoured weapon, its versatility allowing her to channel her fire magic in ways she had never imagined. With a snap, she could send a wave of flame hurtling toward her enemies or entangle them in fiery coils. The whip also gave her a unique edge in close combat, its length and speed keeping opponents at bay while allowing her to strike with precision. Rose honed her skills in mock battles, learning to manipulate the whip's flames with deadly accuracy. She developed a signature technique, the serpent's lash, where the whip coiled around her body before striking like a viper, showcasing her graceful yet ferocious style. But the whip also became a symbol of rebellion. When Rose's flames scorched the training ground during a harsh session, the Order began to view her as not just an asset, but a potential threat. For Rose, the whip was a source of solace. The supple leather in her calloused hands reminded her that even in the darkest corners of the realm, she could forge her own path to freedom, no matter the cost. As Rose's fire magic grew in power and intensity, so too did its unpredictability. By her early 20s, the flames within her began responding not just to her will, but also her volatile emotions, flaring wildly in moments of anger or fear. The artisans of the Order of the Grey, renowned for their mastery in crafting magical artifacts, saw an opportunity to create something extraordinary to help Rose control her chaotic power. They gifted her the Fire Kiss armor, a masterpiece of both artistry and functionality. Forged from a rare alloy infused with potent fire-resistant enchantments, the armor gleamed with a polished sheen of crimson and bronze. When Rose donned it, the armor felt like a second skin, molding perfectly to her body with a comforting warmth that seemed to embrace and soothe her restless inner flames. The armor's chestplate was adorned with intricate engravings in the shape of intertwining flames, each delicate line glowing faintly with embers of her own magic. At the center rested a brilliant crimson gemstone known as the Infernal Ruby. This gem served as both a focal point to channel Rose's immense power and a stabilizing anchor to help maintain control, absorbing any excess energy from her fire magic. Her shoulder plates offered robust protection without restricting mobility, while the arm guards extended down to her hands, culminating in open-palmed gloves. Etched with arcane runes, these arm pieces allowed Rose to seamlessly channel her fire through the armor itself. This intuitive design enhanced her ability to summon and wield flames in combat, most notably in conjunction with her signature bullwhip, which crackled with searing heat and fiery precision. The armor's lower half consisted of reinforced leather panels strategically combined with fire-resistant metal alloys, creating the perfect balance of flexibility for ease of movement and durability to withstand the rigors of battle. At Rose's waist, an ornate belt bore a striking rose-shaped emblem, a poignant symbol of both her lost heritage and steadfast defiance against the oppressive shadows that sought to control her. Flowing elegantly from her shoulders was a sweeping crimson cloak lined with flame-resistant netherweave silk. More than mere decoration, this cloak acted as a conduit for Rose's magic, allowing her to channel raging torrents of fire in expansive arcs and searing barriers. As she moved, the cloak shimmered and danced like a living flame, a mesmerizing display of her vibrant power. The true genius of the Firekiss armor lay in its astonishing ability to amplify and precisely channel Rose's mighty flames. By supernaturally attuning itself to her unique magic, the armor allowed Rose to wield fire with unprecedented control and accuracy. When she brandished her formidable bullwhip, dazzling flames would erupt from the etched runes and surge along its length, leaving scintillating trails of molten light in its wake. In the heat of battle, the armor's enchantments could even absorb incoming fire and heat-based attacks, transmuting that destructive energy into fuel for Rose's own devastating arcane powers. However, the Firekiss armor was not merely a tool to augment combat capabilities, it also served as a crucial safeguard against the destructive force of Rose's own magic. The powerful enchantments woven into every piece of the armor provided a stabilizing buffer and layer of protection. During perilous moments when Rose's emotions ran rampant and threatened to spiral out of control, the infernal ruby would pulse with an otherworldly radiance, drawing the excess wild energy into itself like a sorcerous lightning rod, siphoning away the dangerous unrestrained flames to prevent catastrophic backlash. By integrating protection with amplification, the Firekiss armor empowered Rose to embrace the full potential of her magic without fear of harming herself or her allies. It was a marvel of arcane engineering and artisanship that would prove pivotal in her journey. Wearing the armor, Rose was a force to be reckoned with, radiating a commanding, fiery presence. Though still under the Order's eye, the armor provided a taste of the freedom she yearned for and would one day claim. Rose scrubbed the soot-streaked ceremonial dagger, her raw knuckles aching against the cold hilt. The Order had punished her for a fire spell gone awry, sentencing her to hours cleaning weaponry in the damp vault of war. If you cannot control the fire, you are no better than the tools you now clean, a magister had sneered. As Rose worked, a voice startled her. You missed a spot. A tall, wiry man leaned against the doorway, dark hair falling across his forehead. His plain uniform marked him as a servant, but a glint in his grey eyes hinted at hidden depths. Mind your own business, Rose shot back. Undeterred, he approached. Relax, I'm Kaelion, the least troublesome person you'll meet here. He crouched beside her, examining a breastplate with exaggerated seriousness. They say this punishment builds character. I think they just enjoy our suffering. Rose hid a smile. If you're trying to be funny, you're wasting your time. I'm not trying. I'm naturally hilarious, Kaelion grinned. They worked in silence, Kaelion helping polish the armor. His unhurried presence was strangely comforting. As they finished, Kaelion sighed. See? Not so bad with a partner in crime. Rose smiled genuinely. Thanks, I guess. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. Anytime, Kaelion said, standing. But don't let the magisters catch you smiling. They might think you're happy. He left, but his unexpected kindness lingered, a spark of hope in the Order's oppressive world. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the training courtyard as Rose sat against a cracked pillar, her fire whip coiled in her lap. Frustration burned within her after another failed attempt to control her magic. Kaelion's voice broke the silence. Looks like someone's had a long day. He sat beside her, their shoulders nearly touching, his presence comforting. Unused to opening up, Rose hesitated, but Kaelion's gentle, non-judgmental gaze made her walls crumble. I keep messing up, she confessed. The fire takes over like I'm too weak to stop it. Kaelion shook his head. You're not weak, Rose. Far from it. You have incredible power. The problem is them, not you. They want to suppress who you are, control you. But you're meant to burn bright, to be free. His words ignited a flicker of warmth in her chest. Rose met his eyes, seeing sincerity shining back. You're different from the rest. Why are you even here? Kaelion's laugh was hollow. Let's just say we don't all choose our paths. Pain laced his voice. Instinctively, Rose placed her hand on his arm, a gentle touch. Maybe we can change that. Kaelion's gaze softened, the space between them charged. Carefully, he brushed a lock of her fiery hair aside, his fingertips grazing her cheek and lingering. Maybe. But I'm glad we're on this path together, for now. The silence wrapped around them, heavy with unspoken understanding. For the first time in ages, Rose felt a bud of hope bloom in her heart. Kaelion saw beyond the weapon the Order wanted to forge her into. With him, she didn't feel so alone. His belief in her sparked the possibility that she could break free of the path laid before her, that she could take control of her own fate. In the moonlight, a profound connection took root, a bond that would forever alter the course of their lives. The chamber was dark and imposing, lit only by the flickering light of enchanted braziers that cast long, distorted shadows across the stone walls. Rose stood at the centre, her back straight and her jaw clenched, trying to ignore the weight of the Magister's stares. Their faces, obscured by their ceremonial hoods, gave them an almost inhuman presence. She hated these meetings, hated the way they looked at her as if she were a specimen rather than a person. "Rose," the Grand Magister's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding, "your fire magic has shown promise." There was a note of hesitation in his words, as though even that small acknowledgement had cost him. "But control remains your greatest weakness." Rose's fists tightened at her sides, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that defiance only fed their cruelty. The bite marks of their discipline still lingered in her memories. "To further your progress," he continued, "you have been selected for a mission of critical importance. In the northern reaches of the Umbral Realm lies the Flameheart Crystal, a relic of immense power that has eluded us for centuries. It is said to resonate with those who possess mastery over fire. If you are worthy, the crystal will submit to your will." Rose's breath caught. The Flameheart Crystal was a legend whispered among the Order's ranks, its power rumoured to enhance fire magic beyond comprehension. The idea that they were entrusting her with its retrieval was both thrilling and deeply suspicious. Her fingers tingled with the phantom sensation of flames waiting to be called. "Why me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of questions brewing in her mind. The Grand Magister's lips curved into a thin, humourless smile. "Because it is time for you to prove yourself. This mission will test your abilities and your resolve. Failure will not be tolerated." The words hung in the air like a noose around her neck. Rose nodded stiffly. "Understood." "You will not go alone," the Grand Magister added, his tone colder now. "Kaelion will accompany you." Rose blinked, caught off guard. "Kaelion?" She couldn't hide the faint surprise in her voice. From the shadows of the chamber, Kaelion stepped forward, his usual smirk softened into something more deferential. The dim light caught the sharp angles of his face, highlighting a thin scar that traced his left jawline. He gave her a quick, almost playful bow, though the glint in his violet eyes betrayed his amusement at her reaction. His dark robes seemed to drink in the brazier's light, making the silver runes embroidered along their edges shimmer like starlight. "The mission requires both strength and subtlety," the Grand Magister explained. "Kaelion will provide logistical support and ensure the artifact's safe return." He turned his gaze to Kaelion. "Your orders are clear. Do not interfere unless absolutely necessary." Kaelion inclined his head, his expression unreadable beneath the calculated charm. "Of course, Grand Magister. Rose and I will ensure the mission is a success." The way he said her name carried a hint of curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he looked forward to solving. Rose felt a flicker of annoyance at his inclusion. This was her test, her chance to prove herself, and the last thing she needed was someone tagging along to play babysitter. "You leave at dawn," the Grand Magister said. his tone final. Do not disappoint us. The threat in those last words carried the weight of years of conditional acceptance, of privileges that could be stripped away as easily as they were granted. As they left the chamber, Kaelion fell into step beside her. The oppressive silence of the fortress corridors was broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps. "Well," he said after a moment, his voice light and teasing, "looks like we're partners now." Rose shot him a sidelong glance. "This isn't a partnership. You're just here to carry the bags." Kaelion chuckled, unfazed. "Fair enough. But if we're going to be spending a lot of time together, we might as well try to enjoy it. Who knows? You might even find me useful." Rose rolled her eyes, but she couldn't completely hide the small, amused smile that tugged at her lips. "Just stay out of my way." Kaelion held up his hands in mock surrender. "Whatever you say, Firebrand." As they approached the preparation chambers, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more than just a test. The Magisters had never trusted her before. Why now? And why send Kaelion? Something about it all felt wrong, but for now she pushed the doubts aside. She had a mission to complete, and nothing, not even Kaelion's constant teasing, was going to distract her. The northern reaches of the Umbral Realm were nothing like the fortress Rose had called home for most of her life. The darkened skies stretched endlessly overhead, the air heavy with a strange, stifling stillness that seemed to press against her skin like cold silk. The land was barren and jagged, its rocky surface fractured by deep fissures that breathed with an unnatural heat. Here, shadows danced without light, their movements erratic and unsettling, as if guided by an invisible puppeteer. Rose and Kaelion moved cautiously through the terrain, the flickering torch in her hand casting long shadows across the broken ground. The silence between them was broken occasionally by Kaelion's light-hearted quips, his attempts to chip away at the tension that clung to her like a second skin. Each word seemed to echo too loudly in this dead place. "So," he said, stepping over a jagged rock with practiced grace, "what's the plan when we get there? Grab the crystal, avoid any ancient traps, and be back in time for dinner." His shadow, cast by the torchlight, seemed to move a fraction after he did. Rose shot him a look, her patience already wearing thin. The oppressive atmosphere of this place set her nerves on edge. "The plan is to not get killed. If you can manage that, we'll call it a success." Kaelion smirked, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that belied his tone, a watchfulness that suggested he saw more than he let on. "Don't worry. I'll do my best not to slow you down, Firebrand." The nickname grated against her nerves like rough stone. They pressed on, the landscape growing more treacherous with every step. The shadows seemed to grow thicker as they neared their destination, their movements more deliberate, as if watching, waiting. Rose couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded towards something that hungered in the dark. It happened suddenly. One moment, the path ahead was clear, and the next, the ground erupted in a flurry of movement. Shadowbeasts emerged from the fissures, their forms twisting and writhing like living darkness. Their glowing red eyes locked onto the pair, and with an ear-splitting screech that echoed through the dead air, they attacked. Rose reacted instantly. Her whip uncoiled with a crack, a trail of fire slicing through the air as she lashed out at the nearest beast. The flames seared through its body, the creature dissolving into ash with an anguished howl that seemed to reverberate through her bones. Kaelion drew a short blade from his belt, its metal gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. While Rose's fire lit up the battlefield, he stayed in her shadow, fending off any beasts that slipped past her fiery onslaught. His movements were like water flowing between the creatures with deadly precision. "Don't hold back now," Kaelion called out, ducking under a swipe from one of the creatures. "Show me what you've got." Rose didn't need the encouragement. She let the fire within her burn freely, the flames roaring to life around her. She spun, the whip lashing out in arcs of molten light, each strike cutting through the darkness like a blade. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctual, the fire bending to her will with a grace and power that even she hadn't realized she possessed. The heat of battle sang in her blood, each strike more precise than the last. One of the beasts lunged at her from behind, its claws reaching for her throat, but Kaelion was there in an instant, his blade driving into its side. The creature shrieked and disintegrated, leaving behind only a wisp of smoke that curled through the air like a dying breath. "Not bad for a bag carrier," he quipped, flashing her a grin even as his eyes tracked the next threat. Rose ignored him, her focus entirely on the battle. She felt the fire coursing through her veins, an intoxicating rush of heat and power. The beasts fell one by one, unable to withstand her relentless assault, their shadowy forms dissolving into nothingness against her flames. Finally, the last of them dissolved into ash, leaving the pair standing in the eerie silence that followed. Rose's chest heaved as she lowered her whip, the flames slowly receding until only faint embers danced along its length. Kaelion sheathed his blade, his expression a mixture of awe and amusement. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said, his tone lighter than the gravity of the moment warranted. Rose wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, her gaze still scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The rush of battle still hummed beneath her skin. "You handled yourself well," she admitted reluctantly. Kaelion raised an eyebrow, clearly delighted by the rare compliment. "Careful, Rose. Keep talking like that, and I might start thinking you like having me around." Despite his teasing, there was a note of genuine respect in his voice. She rolled her eyes, but there was a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. For all his teasing, Kaelion had proven himself more capable than she had expected. Perhaps the Magisters weren't completely foolish in pairing them together. "Let's keep moving," she said, coiling her whip and stepping back onto the path. "The crystal isn't going to wait for us." Kaelion fell into step beside her, his usual grin softening into something more genuine. "After that performance, I think it's the crystal that should be worried." Kaelion, for his part, played his role perfectly. He let his admiration for her abilities shine through, knowing it would stroke her ego just enough to lower her defenses. With every passing moment, he could feel the walls she had built around herself starting to crack. The battle had revealed far more about her capabilities than she realized, and that was exactly what he had been sent to discover. "Oh, you've found your way here, have you? Curious about what's next?" Pauses. "Good, because there's plenty more where this came from."
If you want to stay in the know, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications, unless of course you enjoy surprises. But something tells me you don't like being left in the dark. Go on, make sure you don't miss a thing, because once you're here, whispers, there's no turning back.